Now, a little bit about Grace for everyone to know who she is and what does she currently do. Grace is a final year medical student at Oxford University with over 1,000 hours of tutoring experience. Grace brings exceptional expertise in supporting students through the entire medical school application journey, particularly in crafting compelling personal statements and building standout CVs. Having aced the UCAT as well as the BMAT exam and excelled both in panel and MMI interviews, she secured, offers from a lot of UK medical schools that she's applied to, and she knows exactly what the top programs require. So, with her guidance, all the students present on the call today will be able to strengthen whatever their knowledge is and achieve clarity and have a more and achieve clarity as to what is expected out of them in terms of drafting a right personal statement and CV. So without further ado, I'd like Grace to take over. Maybe Grace, you can introduce yourself, and if you have something to share with the students, you can share it, and then we'll start with the Q&A.
Yeah, hi everyone, it's nice to meet you. As was said on the screen, I'm a final year medical student at Oxford. Getting quite scary now. My final exams are in January, so I'm very soon to be a doctor. And yeah, I'm just here to help talk you through sort of what will make your personal statement stand out, because I'm sure you're all aware medicine and dentistry is very competitive no matter where you apply in the world, whether you're applying in India, in Saudi, in anywhere in Europe, in the UK. So there's lots of things that you can do to make yourself stand out, and I'll happily sort of answer any questions and give you some tips as we go through today.
All right, great. So you have something to share with us, Grace, or should I just go into the Q&A?
So I have something to share later on. So just ask questions and I'll share when necessary.
Perfect. So for all the students and parents present on the call, I'd just like to let you know that this is a meeting. So of course, you will be given the opportunity to ask questions directly. But towards the end, I will probably finish off the questions that I have from a couple of students and parents who couldn't join in. And then after that, as and when you have any questions, just raise your hand and you can unmute and ask your question. Okay. So with that, let's start with the first question. I think what I've done is, Grace, I've divided the questions. So we're going to, the first set of questions are going to be regarding personal statements. The second set of questions will be related to the CV. And towards the end, we'll just cover some generic questions as and when we reach it. Okay. So the first question or the generic question would be is, what are the key elements that should be included in a personal statement for a medicine and dental program?
So first thing I want to say in general is it's really important to look up how long your personal statement is allowed to be. So for example, in the UK, it can only be 4,000 characters. That's not words, that's 4,000 letters, including spaces. So it's basically a typed A4 document, which is very, very small to showcase all the amazing things that you've achieved and like the experiences that you've done. This differs for different institutions. In the UK, you apply through something called UCAS, so every single university only allows you to submit that one statement. So it's really worth looking up, if you're applying to lots of different countries, like not just the UK, but elsewhere, what they allow, because there's no point writing a beautiful 5-page showcase of what you can do if you're not allowed to submit that. So that's the first thing. And then the areas that you want to cover is you want a quite short but sweet, so like 3 to 4 line paragraph on why is it you want to do medicine or dentistry. They're such long courses and so that you have to be so devoted to do them. No one does them just because. Everyone has a reason as to why they want to do it. And that might be because you've had a personal experience with healthcare, whether that be medical or dental. For example, my granddad unfortunately had a genetic form of Alzheimer's, which meant he got it at the age of 50, which is very, very young. And I grew up in the first 15 years of my life visiting him weekly in care homes. So despite having no family in medicine, that was the thing that really subconsciously, without realizing over the years of growing up, kind of made me want to do medicine. So I spoke about that in my first paragraph. It doesn't have to be. If you're very lucky to not have had any big family illnesses or any like interactions with healthcare yourself, you might want to do it because maybe a friend of yours has a certain illness or had an interaction, or maybe your parents are medics or dentists, and they've spoken to you about how fulfilling the role is. Whatever reason it is for you, you will have a reason. So like I'd articulate that in the first paragraph, because when someone is reading a personal statement, they might be reading 100 that day. They want to be able to picture who exactly is behind this personal statement and can I relate to why they want to do medicine or dentistry. So that's your first short paragraph. So you're not necessarily talking about any academic achievements in there, just your motivations. And then your next paragraph will ideally be a bit of work experience or volunteering. And I know we're going to go into a bit more detail about the work experience and volunteering later, but pretty much everyone who applies to medicine is very clever and has the academic achievements. So a personal statement is not necessarily there to showcase those academic grades. The university are going to see those anyway, because they have to get your academic certificates sent to them. So it's about showing that you understand what medicine and dentistry involves. They're very different degrees to engineering or to maths or to physics or to biology, because they're vocational, which means that you're going in there with a job at the end of it, and that job is very person facing. It has very unique demands. So you need to have shown your dedication, your understanding of what dentistry and medicine involves, and ideally you'll do that through some work experience and or volunteering. If you can do both, that's excellent. And as I said, we'll go into more detail later, but volunteering in things like care homes or care institutions is what they really stands out to them, because let's be honest, it's not very glamorous. Like volunteering in a care home, it can put a lot of people off medicine. And if you've done a couple of months of working in that environment and you still want to go into it, then that shows them that you're very dedicated. And we can talk through specific examples, and I can share my own personal statement later of how I spoke about that. So for me, after my introduction of why medicine, I then spoke about my work experience and my volunteering. So I spoke about my time in the care home. My next paragraph, I spoke about my time on the wards. I did a week of work experience at a local hospital to get used to the hospital environment, because it's a very different environment to anywhere else in the world, really. Very clinical. Some people feel quite uncomfortable. There's lots of beeping machines. It's busy all the time. So I talk about that next. And then in your next paragraph, that's when you can start talking a bit more about your academic achievements. Have you done any specific research in a particular area? Have you done any extended projects that you're interested in? Have you read any academic books? And that's where I would speak about it. Have you entered any competitions like the biology or maths Olympiad? Have you done well in that? That's where that can come in. And then your final paragraph should be a bit about extracurriculars, because they want to know, what you as a person. It's not medicine, dentistry all the time. We do other things that we enjoy. Do you play basketball for school? Do you play cricket? And that's really important to show the medical and dental schools that you will have a way of having an outlet for these incredibly stressful degrees, and can build up more about you as a person. But that is a very small paragraph. Again, that's only 3 to 4 lines long. And then hopefully you still have space for a very, very small conclusion, and that sums everything up together. And it's a simple statement like, hopefully you can see from my volunteering, work experience, academic achievements that I have the passion and dedication to take on this very challenging degree, and hopefully I'll flourish in an institution like yours. Should have said this at the start, but often you can't personalize your personal statement to the institution. So in the UK, you're not allowed to do that. You will write one personal statement that will go to all 5 universities. So if you write in your personal statement, I really want to go to Newcastle University, and then it gets sent to Manchester, to Oxford, to Birmingham, they're not going to want to take you because you've specifically said you really want Newcastle. Why would they take you if you're not putting them first? So it is a very difficult thing to do, because that's why you want to end it with a broad statement like an institution like yours, because you're appealing to them without giving any names. Hopefully I know it was quite a long-winded answer for the first question, but that's how I'd structure it.
No, it was absolutely great and very insightful. Following your response to my question, I have another question. Now, obviously, students have to portray their motivation for studying medicine, right? So, how could they do that in the best possible way? And what are some common mistakes that students could avoid that usually, you have come across students making when they're preparing a personal statement?
So I think common mistakes are people being very unrealistic about what they're going to achieve in a medical career. So a lot of people saying things like, I want to go into medicine because I want to change lives, or like I want to save loads of lives. And obviously, we'd all love to save some lives. I hope that in my career I'll save at least one or two, but that's very unrealistic. Medicine isn't what's portrayed on the big TV programs. It's not what's on Grey's Anatomy. It's not what's on like Casualty, anything like that. The majority of people you see in hospital will die, unfortunately. That's the nature of it. Life isn't something which goes on forever. So if your sole reason of going into medicine is because you want to save people, then you're going into it for the wrong reasons. You should be wanting to go into medicine because you want to improve people's quality of life. And that's something that we can do with everybody. We can always try and make them more comfortable, or we can try and get them to the location they want to be at for the final days of their life. And there are some lives that we can save. Some people come in, unfortunately, because they've been stabbed or in a road traffic collision, and we can save them. But that's around 5% of the patient population. Most people who come in are those who have chronic conditions like diabetes or cancer, and we're not necessarily going to cure that. So if I read a personal statement that was like, I want to go into medicine because I want to save lots of lives, that is a big red flag for anyone reading that personal statement, because it tells the person reading it that they don't actually know what this job involves. So that's like common mistake number one. Other common mistakes are people, I guess, writing the personal statement and not giving the examiner that they've got a good idea of what the medical field involves on a day-to-day basis. The medicine everywhere, and particularly like in the UK with the NHS at the moment, is very, very challenging. And people are working incredibly long shifts. They often have like far too many things to do. And a lot of medicine is actually, when you're quite a young doctor, like I'll be next year, is I'm not doing the saving lives by the bedside. I'm doing a lot of the admin. I'm writing the discharge summaries. I'm doing all of it, like reconciliating their drug chart. These are minor things, but they're important. But if I read a personal statement and that clearly shows that someone hasn't been into hospitals, haven't spoken with doctors, haven't spoken with lots of different like patients, that to me is a red flag as well. So if I read a personal statement that said they want to save loads of lives, and I've also read the personal statement and I can't see them talking about interactions with different demographics, they haven't spoken with old people, they haven't done their work experience, then that would also be a big red flag, because the person who's reading it will say, well, why is it you want to do medicine? Why don't you just go and do like a science degree? Like, you don't need to do that medical aspect. So they're the two biggest mistakes. And then how you can portray your motivation kind of links back to my answer for the first question. So one, in your introduction, what is your genuine motivation? Because you will have one. And your introduction is the hardest bit to write. So often people will get stuck at not writing their personal statement because they'll struggle with the introduction. So leave the introduction to the end. I rewrote my introduction 24 times. It was such hard work. So your motivation will, in personal statements, you don't want to say, I am motivated because. You want the examiner to infer. The best personal statements aren't ones where you've said, I am good at this, I have done this. You'll show your motivation by being like, during the week I spent on work experience at X hospital, I saw this and it was really impactful on me because. And that's like a really subtle way of showing that you're motivated without saying, I am a motivated student because I do this. No one likes people who like state or is quite boastful. That comes across really poorly. And in further questions, I can give more specific examples. We're talking about like the work experience of how you can sort of phrase that in your personal statement.
Great. Amazing. Okay, so my next question is, What approach should students take when reflecting on challenges they've overcome? You know, so
Mhm.
do you tell us a little bit about it?
So again, it will depend how much you want to do this will depend on what the application process is like for your medical schools. So in the UK, every medical school interviews. So if you write your personal statement, they like you from your personal statement and your achievements, they'll invite you to an interview. And we have two different types of interviews in the UK, as mentioned in like my introductory paragraph. We have panel interviews and multiple mini interviews. And every university that does a multiple mini interview will have a station on how you've overcome challenges. So you know that you're going to get directly asked about that later on. So you don't need to go into it in your personal statement as much. And this is why what you write in your personal statement is going to be so dependent on where you're applying. So that's the first thing that you need to do before you sit down and write it. And again, when you're reflecting on challenges, you don't want to state, this is a challenge that I faced and this is how I've done it. So let me see if I can work out how to share my screen. I'm just trying to find the bit of, okay, here. Will it allow me to share my screen? Is that okay?
Yeah, for sure.
And I think it should start sharing now in a second.
Yep. Yes.
I'm not expecting to read all of this. We'll go into the bits a lot later. But
Okay.
this paragraph that I want to focus on to show how I reflected on a challenge. So in the bits that are highlighted, this is my work experience paragraph. And here I've said Leighton Hospital is the name of the hospital that I did my work experience at. So I said, my recent week at Leighton Hospital was as invaluable as it was exciting, and it corrected my media-induced preconceptions about the medical profession. Time spent with doctors showed how they built unique rapport with patients to deliver their conclusions, a key skill I hope to master and emulate in the future. So if you just break that down there before you read the rest of it, here I've not stated anything. It's not said, I spent time with doctors. It's implied time spent with the doctors showed how they built unique rapport. So that in a way is me reflecting on what I saw. So I've reflected that they built unique rapport, and I've picked out that that is a key skill that I hope to master. And again, in your personal statement, you don't have to, your personal statement is not showing that you already have all the skills to be a doctor, because you don't. Nobody does until you've done medical school, as we wouldn't need medical school. So there's nothing wrong with saying this is something that I know is important and I'm looking forward to developing. So that's what kind of I wrote in there. And then I went into a bit more detail. So I said, I saw this on a one-to-one in outpatient clinic consultations, then in the wider setting whilst on wards, in a higher pressure environment, both introducing me to the daily routine of a doctor. So there I've shown in the space of 2 lines that I've seen lots of different medical settings. Not everything is ward-based. A lot of doctors spend time in clinics where people from the community who are out and living their lives will come in to see a specialist. So I understand that role of a doctor, but I also understand that on what the ward environment is like. And I've clearly highlighted that these areas are different. Wards are far more stressful because people are often sicker. And it shows that I can, despite seeing these environments, I understand what it involves. I still want to do medicine. And then the next part is more focused in like the UK or like NHS, because this is where I was applying, saying that it was fascinating to spend time with the bed staff, seeing the logistics that goes into keeping beds available whilst the trust was at maximum capacity. So that is me subtly showing I understand the NHS, which is where I'm going to work and where I've done my experience at in the UK, is very pressured at the moment, and that I understand it and that I'm still wanting to go into that. So that's reflecting on a challenge. And the next bit is probably the most typical reflecting on a challenge. So during my time with them, I witnessed the sad passing of a patient, proving to myself I can cope with the harsh reality that not everyone can be saved. This week demonstrates how teamwork underpins everything that goes on with the hospital, and successful communication between staff and patients is paramount. So if we take a step back and look at all the things that I've covered in this one paragraph, I've covered that building rapport with patients is very important, that I understand the different environments that doctors work within. I understand it's highly pressured. I understand everyone can't be saved and I can cope with it. And ultimately, teamwork and communication is so important. That's 5 major areas I've covered in that one paragraph. And this was the exact personal statement I submitted to Oxford, I submitted to Leeds, Birmingham, Bristol, and I can't remember my 5th one now. In the UK, you can only apply to 4 med schools. This also went to Leeds for biomedicine. So this was my exact personal statement I submitted. Would I go back and change some of it now? Yes, I would. I'm a finalist. There are other things that I probably could put in here, but just being transparent, this is what I submitted. So that is how you can reflect on your challenges by saying, I witnessed this and this proved to myself that I can cope with it. And this links back to what I was saying before in terms of one of the big mistakes is people being unrealistic. Clearly here I showed that I understand that not everyone can be saved in hospital. A lot of people, most people in any healthcare setting in worldwide are over the age of 60 because older people are more likely to get ill. That is inevitable with our parents, with our grandparents. So that in that small amount of writing gave the examiner or the interviewer a lot of information about me understanding what my future career is going to involve.
Great. That was amazing. It's so nice that you had your personal statement from many years back. So I'm sure students have a lot to learn in the coming few minutes. So I have I think the last 2 questions for personal statement. The next one is, what style and tone should students aim for to ensure their personal statement stands out? Can you provide some examples of languages or phrases that students should avoid?
So I think writing it in first person is, I won't write it in third, like Grace did this, Grace spent time here, write it in first person. And that's the tone in which you should take. You don't want to make it too friendly, so you don't use any informal language. So no slang, as I'm sure all of you be aware anyway. Kind of like the tone that you got the idea of when you read that paragraph. The phrases to avoid is, I am a hardworking, dedicated. You don't want to say I am anything because that is really boastful. You want to say things like, I hope you can see that I am this. So you don't ever want to state and make yourself sound amazing, which is difficult because you all are. I'm sure you all are hardworking and dedicated and very, very clever. But you telling them that is going to do, anyone can tell them that they're clever, hardworking, dedicated. That doesn't mean anything. You need to show that through the experiences that you've had and that you've done. And because the UK personal statement, the one that I had to write, is very, very short, and I'm sure no matter where you're applying, even if it's slightly longer than that, you could probably write half a book on why you want to do medicine and your experiences. So it's going to be word count limited either way. So I like words which end in ing. So during my time spent at Leighton Hospital, witnessing the sad passing of a patient. The more detail you can give, the better. So often a big mistake I see when I read people's personal statements is they favour quantity over quality. And it is very difficult when you write a personal statement. I did gold D of E. I don't know if you do the Duke of Edinburgh where you are, but Duke of Edinburgh is a big thing in the UK, and there's different levels: silver, bronze, silver, and gold. Gold is a 12-month program where you have to do 3 lots of weekly volunteering. You go on a big hike, you do baking, etc. I didn't even have a chance to mention that in my personal statement, despite that being a massive thing that I did. And that's just because I realised that I would just be shoehorning it in. I'd be pushing it in. I wouldn't be able to give it the time of day. I was able to talk about it at my interview, so it didn't go to waste per se. But you have to sit down and go, what are the key things I need to cover in this personal statement? So we've gone over how to structure it, but you need to sit down and come up with a list of skills that you want to talk about. So for medicine and dentistry, communication is obviously absolutely paramount. How are you going to show that you've developed good communication skills and you can communicate with lots of different people? How are you going to show that you understand that teamwork is important and you're a team player? How are you going to show that you have understanding of the healthcare system as a whole? And there are lots of skills I didn't mention in my personal statement because I haven't got time, but I made a list of the top 5 that I think was most important and I covered them. So, yeah, I would always write a list of skills and that you want to cover them, and then try and be like as specific as possible, because they want to be able to imagine you within that setting, because that's really like important for them. So when they read it, they want to be able to say, picture this person in the care home that you're talking about doing the activity you've explained. If you just say, I spent 1 hour a week volunteering in a care home, full stop. Again, brilliant. It's really good that you've done that and you've shown your dedication, but you've not shown what you've learned from it. And one thing my friend who said to me, it's the most useful thing anyone said to me about a personal statement is, don't put anything in your personal statement that you haven't said what you've learned from doing it. So if you write, I've done this, so what? Say to yourself, so what? What have you gained from that? So if you said volunteering weekly in a care home for the past 6 months has demonstrated the challenges of working with the elderly population, running recall memory sessions, like demonstrated that we can really improve quality of life without any medical intervention at all, actually. And like a lot of good can be done by just sitting down and listening to patients. That gives me so much information that you really understand what it is to work with older people. And so that's the level of detail you want to be giving. So phrases like, from this I learned, this highlighted, this demonstrated, they're like key phrases that you want in your personal statement.
Amazing. Great. Last question. How to tailor a personal statement specific to a particular university? So if you can tell us a little bit about what, if they're talking about a particular university, what is the, what are the different aspects they can talk about, how can they better describe the location or the program or what did they find fascinating about that particular program? Just highlight the key facts or the key points that students must focus on when they are, talking about the university.
So again, this is going to depend where you're applying. So in the UK, you cannot do that because you only get the chance to write one personal statement that goes to all 5 places. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you still can tailor it. You just have to be more subtle about it. So I was applying obviously to Oxford, and Oxford have a very they love research. Basically, they put a lot of emphasis on how big research is as part of the medical degree. So I knew that I wanted to put at least one paragraph into my personal statement where I spoke about the fact that I had experience with research. And that's, if you really want to go to a research heavy university like the London universities in the UK, Oxford, Cambridge, then you're going to want a paragraph in there that shows you have research experience, whether that's because you've shadowed somebody in a laboratory. I spent some time in AstraZeneca, which you may have all heard of because AstraZeneca also created the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. It's a global company, one of the biggest pharmaceutical companies worldwide. And I spent a week with them. So I spoke about that. So I knew what it was like to actually work in a lab. What was it like to do pipette, lab-based experiments? So I showed them I knew that. And that clearly showed them I was motivated to go out and get experience in the research field. If you can write individual personal statements to each of your universities, then of course do tailor it. And the most important thing to mention, or the thing definitely to mention first, is what is the course structure like and why does it suit you as a person? So medicine is taught in many different ways worldwide. You have the very traditional format of the preclinical clinical split, which is what we do at Oxford, and it's what we do at a lot of London universities. And that's where you do 3 years of basically a science degree, and then 3 years on the wards. And why does that suit you as a person? So it suits my learning style because I know I perform best when I have all the information before I apply it. So can you speak about that and the fact that when you were at school and perhaps in biology, you did better at the experiments, the hands-on side of thing, when you knew the content? Is that how you learn? Or do you want an integrated program where you go to hospitals quite early on because you know you learn better when you can relate it to a real life scenario? So that's the thing you really want to be like putting it in there. And then if you can put specific universities and talk about them, then course structure is the most important. But then at the end of the day, be personal. What is the reason you prefer that university to another? Lots of universities will have the same teaching style. So whilst teaching style is the most important thing to talk about, why did you choose there? Do they have a particular, can you intercalate? Can you do a third year in a particular program? And is that university one of the only ones to offer that program? Do they enable you to spend some time abroad? And that's really important to you because understanding different cultures is the best way to learn about other people and will ultimately enable you to be a better doctor, a better dentist. So is there things specific to that university? And therefore, when the university read your personal statement, they'll know you've actually spent a decent amount of time looking on their websites, like reading into it. Have you actually visited the university for an open day? And did you really like the vibe of the university? Did you feel like you could spend 5 to 6 years of your life there, which is a significant amount of your young adult life? So always think about it in a hierarchy. Course structure is the most important. Why does it suit you? Is there a specific thing to that university? So can you intercalate in a particular area that isn't offered elsewhere? Or do they have abroad programs? And then the third bit can just be a general reason as to why you want to go. And it doesn't have to be necessarily related to the course. Did you go to that university and you really like the city? Can you imagine yourself living there? Because the people reading your personal statement at the end of the day are humans, they're people. And if you say, I want to go to this university because I can see myself fitting in, I can see myself making friends here and I'm going to feel safe, then they're going to read that personal statement and be like, this person's the right fit for the university. The people reading it are going to have daughters, sons, sisters, brothers, fathers, mothers. They want you to go to a place that you're going to feel comfortable and have a good time at. And so you're allowed, don't just think everything I have to do has to be medicine, dentistry. Yes, that's most of it, but you're a person at the end of the day and you can integrate that as well.
Interesting. Okay. Great. Thank you very much for so much of information on the personal statement. I think students have a much better understanding as to how to better organize their personal statement. But of course, they can anytime meet with you, even if they require to. Now let's get into the CVs. So of course, many universities do require CVs. So if you can probably begin by letting us know what are the essential sections or components in a CV for an undergraduate medicine dental program.
So I can share mine. I probably think that's the best way of me talking.
Sure.
Again, I will caveat that UK medical schools do not require a CV. So I don't have the CV for the purpose of applying to university. I have this for the purpose of applying to jobs or sending it off if I want to apply to an internship. So again, it still has all the achievements that I've done in it. My CV was nowhere near as long as this before I went to university because I hadn't done half of these things. So don't worry if when you first write your CV, it's very short. But the areas that you want to include, and this is how most people, whether they're applying to university or not, structure their CV. So at the top, you obviously want your name and you want your contact details so that they can contact you. So email, phone number, some people put an address on. I'm always moving house because I'm at uni, so I don't put my address on there. And then you want your education. So you won't have any of these. So I'll scroll down to your A levels, your AS levels, or the equivalent of what you might be studying, and then your GCSEs. And you want to put where you did that, so what institution, and then you want to put the grades that you achieved and in what years did you sit those qualifications. So I did 9 GCSEs. I've only put 3, I got A stars in all of them, but I highlighted English, literature, language, and mathematics because in the UK they're required, like, the aim of the UK is that no one can leave education without having a C in English language, English literature, language, and maths. That's a UK-based thing. So they're the core GCSEs that everyone has to sit. So that's why I've specifically highlighted those that I have them. And then the first statement is your academic achievement. So obviously we've seen your grades here and your education, but what have you achieved in addition to that? So I've highlighted, like, I've presented at certain conferences and the date at which I presented them. So you should structure them from like what you did most recently down to what you've done like in a chronological order. And CVs are supposed to be short. Ideally, you want to fit them onto one page. I've not achieved that. So don't worry if you can't. But I could write a whole page on what I presented at this conference. That's the tricky thing with CVs. You kind of want to highlight what exactly you were doing. So I said I've been selected because that shows that it's not just a free-for-all. Not anyone can go. It's that I've been selected to go. And what did I present on? I'm a preclinical lecturer nationally for medicine. So I've written that on there, what I actually lecture. And that they're delivered live and also recorded online so people can access them. That's a useful bit of information because if I'm applying for like something, you know, I mean, you'll be applying for medicine or dentistry, but people can watch my lecture and see how I communicate. Do I communicate well? How do I engage the audience? So this is another way that I'm saying you can go and look at me in a different setting. So these are all the things that I've achieved academically. And then I've spoken a bit about my experience. So particularly for you guys applying for medicine and dentistry, what experience have you done? I haven't got my experience I did before medical school because as you progress in life, that becomes a bit less relevant. If I'm applying for a job, they don't really care about the volunteering I did at the age of 17 in a care home. For you, that's really important though. So you want to put where was that, you want names. So here when I worked at, when I was applying for medicine and during my degree, during the pandemic, I worked at a Sainsbury's in my hometown. So you want your role. So here I was a customer experience supervisor. So if you've volunteered at hospital, what was your official role? So some people are like healthcare assistants, or they're like patient volunteers. Like put your role and then put where you did it. And then you want a little like synopsis of what that involved. So did you hand out teas and coffees to the patients and had a chat to them to like improve their day? Was that what you did? Or did you run did you speak to elderly people in the care home and go through photos of them when they were younger to help improve their memory? Like I want a bit of what you've done. And then there's a little section on the end called personal development. So that's skills or proficiencies that you have. So I'm advanced first aid trained because of, I've learned that at school. I learned that at medical school. And then I'm also DBS checked. But you might want to put on there at your stage, are you quite proficient in Excel? Do you know how to code? Like what languages do you know how to code in? So they're the big segments. So your education, your academic achievements, your experiences, and your personal development. I'll stop sharing.
Amazing. So that's clear as to how one must format or organize the CV. I'll just take one more question on CV because we are running out of time. So I'll just take one more question and then maybe we'll open the floor for questions from the students directly. Okay. So can you let us know, like when a student is preparing a CV, what are some crucial skills they must emphasize on? And also let us know if there's any common mistakes students usually, come across, like you've come across any common mistake when students are preparing as CVs. So do highlight that as well.
So things they must put in for medicine and dentistry is skills that demonstrate communication. So you can demonstrate that in so many ways. So have you had any part-time jobs during your childhood or the time you've been at school, even if it's something like a paper round, or did you work in a local store? Or, volunteering. Like at the end of the day, we communicate all the time. We're communicating now. you need to write down how you've communicated. And in an ideal world, you want to show that you've communicated with different demographics. So in year 10, which was when I was, I think, 15, so not over 10 years, I'm 24, but almost 10 years ago now, I did a week of work experience at a primary school. So that's excellent because I've shown that I can communicate and adapt my communication skills to work with the younger generation. But then I did 6 months of volunteering in a care home. And the communication skills you need to effectively talk to the ends of the spectrum in terms of ages is incredibly different. Children are quite impatient. They don't have much of an attention span. And we were all like that. This is me generalizing, but on the whole, that's what children are like. You have to be very animated and do things to keep them involved and give them rewards and things. Whereas elderly people will sit down and talk to you for hours and hours and hours. But often they might struggle because they're slightly deaf or they're slightly blind. So you need to adapt how you communicate. So you want to put down how you communicate with different people and so how you've done that, when you've done that. And then the other things that you must put down is you have to put down your education and you have to put down your grades as well. So any experiences, any academic achievements, I'm sure you all have plenty of those, whether you've been in school competitions, the names of them are really important because some competitions are specific to different regions or areas. And we might not, if you don't put the name in there, they can't Google it, they can't know about it. But also, if it is, in the UK, we have the National Olympiad. That's the same in every school. Every person who reads that personal statement knows what it is. But if you've done an Olympiad that's present only in your region of the country, then it would be nice if you could, whilst also giving the name of it, can you briefly explain what that is? Because if it's a competition in which you beat over 2,000 students, that's incredibly impressive. But if you don't say that, we're not going to know about it. So it's that fine line. You don't want to over-explain things that clearly everybody knows, but you don't want to under-explain things that are very impressive. So by putting the name in, it gives the person reading the CV the opportunity to go away and read about it if they want to. Common mistakes, again, is not giving details of what that involved. I had the big line in bold of what that was, and then the key skills. So again, sit down and think, what were my key time at Sainsbury's that I want to talk about? Obviously at Sainsbury's, as a customer experience manager, I dealt with people all the time. I worked on the complaints desk, which was very tricky time, but very useful for my communication skills. But I'd already spoken about my communication skills. So what else do I want to put in? I did a lot of work doing reconciliating the cash desk, and I was given a lot of responsibility through that. So that's a skill that I wanted to bring in because I hadn't brought in earlier. So you have to sit down and think, yes, I could probably talk about communication 7 times, but if I've ticked it off once, don't need to tick it off again. So what else can I talk about? And that's why creating a list of the things you think of what makes a good doctor, what makes a good dentist, and then have that list there, have your CV here, and think, have I actually ticked these things off? That'd be what I recommend.